Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed all the coverage of SMU's spring game. And today we will dive into some of the takeaways from that game and also covered news of SMU's latest edition from the transfer portal. Diving into SMU's spring game, it really was about an hour and a half of a little bit of 7-on-7, some one-on-ones with offensive defensive line. And then they went into team for much of that hour and a half. And they broke it up into really the ones on both sides of the ball facing primarily backups. And then towards the end of the spring game, it was pretty much all backups in. And a lot of the walk-ons got time for the final about 20 minutes of the showcase. But there was still a good bit to kind of glean from this spring game at Highland Park High School. It was a fun atmosphere out there on Friday night. SMU was able to, play at Highlander Stadium and get some action in. But as you see, SMU started off with fireworks here, going deep to Jordan Kerley. Get used to that. Preston Stone finds him on a flea flicker, and then they get a little bit of Elijah Chapman involved, and you see him breaking those tackles. Preston said after the game that he kind of short-armed that one to Elijah Chapman. He might have gotten a little bit of momentum going and run over some guys if he had given him a little bit of a better ball there. But the ones got a good bit of time in. There's kind of an overthrow from Preston Stone going for Romello Brinson, who was covered by Sam Westfall, who saw his first action really of the spring. He's had a class that has kept him out of practice as he gets close to graduating. So he's kind of been working out on his own, hasn't practiced much, but a veteran who got some time in the spring game. And, SMU gave Jalen Knighton kind of a light load. We mentioned in our spring game preview podcast that, look, the Miami running back transfer has been sensational during spring. And they really didn't do too much with him when it comes to giving him the ball. Got a couple carries in there. But it was LJ Johnson who saw a lot of carries and production. He had a run late in the spring game that was really impressive, being able to show a little bit of that explosiveness. Velton Gardner had a nice day, as you see, some good cuts, some good conviction with the way he ran the ball in the spring game. So SMU's three running backs that they, rolled out there for the most part, as well as Brandon Epton, who had a nice spring game. I feel like when we look back at, the skill position players who got in on the action, I think two stood out to me the most, and that is Jordan Kerley and Roderick Daniels. And look, Romello Brinson had a couple of big play opportunities too. He had one called back on a push off that would have been a touchdown, and it was the right call. But there, he got open, and it showed some of that athleticism. But for me, Jordan Kerley showed, and granted, he was facing again primarily backups, but he showed you that speed. He showed you that top end playmaking ability that we've talked about so much during spring practice. And for him, it was exactly what you wanted. Him and Preston Stone display that chemistry that they've been building, and also the work that Jordan Kerley's put in during this spring. He's a bigger wide receiver now after adding 10 to 15 pounds. He has that route running ability that is really impressive. But that big play threat is what he's going to bring to this SMU offense. He's got plenty of speed. He comes from a family of speed, and he showed that on Friday night. So I was really impressed with Jordan Kerley. And Roderick Daniels, he had a couple of nice catches, took some screens, made some big plays. You saw in the highlights, or if you watch the full spring game on our YouTube channel, you saw him make some plays over the middle in the passing game. He took some screens and made some nice moves for big gains. So if you haven't subscribed to the On the Pony Express YouTube channel, we're now over 1,000 subscribers on the channel, and you can hit that subscribe button. Keep helping us out on that front. Spread the word on that. We appreciate it. Now, when I look at, how Roderick Daniels was used, that was what I was looking for out of the spring game. Jake Bailey, Dylan Goffney sat out the spring game, as they have all spring, as they are pretty much now recovered from injuries, and we will be back for fall camp. But Roderick Daniels has been used in a multitude of ways during spring, taking handoffs, taking swing passes, getting into the screen game, and of course, taking some shots down the middle of the field and being, a man beater out of that slot position. And I was very impressed with him. That was, I think, kind of the exclamation point on the spring that he wanted to have. And then from there, you kind of look at, the SMU offense, the ones, Preston Stone did some nice things. I think, they tagged some of those deep routes, which I was happy about. They wanted to get him some more work down the field and also keep it relatively low key. I mean, they didn't do anything that really, shocked anyone when it came to, how they were going to, go about the spring game. But this is a group that, got a good bit of time together during the spring. They've been able to work on their timing and work on a bunch of different things. And it's no surprise that, he was able to, move the offense. I think they scored on 2 of 4 really drives together. He was quick with the football. And look, this is an offensive line that was able to give him some time. As you see this dime to Moochie Dixon, and actually, I think they scored on 3 of 4 drives. So this one you see here was out, but then he has a nice little play coming up to RJ Maryland for the touchdown on a scramble. And so this is kind of the cap of his night to get RJ Maryland into the end zone. RJ Maryland played really hard. He had a really nice couple of really nice catches over the middle. He took a big hit from Bryan Massey and popped right up. We'll talk about him in a second. But look, LJ Johnson continued to show his impressive, burst and speed. I felt like it was a win-win all around for the SMU offense with what they were able to bring to this spring game. And even Teddy Knox got in on the action. He got nicked up a little bit late in the spring game, but had a couple nice catches, made some nice moves, and picked up some first downs for this offense. So I can't say enough about, look, this was a group that was facing a defense that was primarily backups, but you have to like that kind of confidence boosting. And for Rhett Lashley, he talked about, getting through the spring healthy. And that was exactly what they did. They came away from that spring game without pretty much any major injuries. I know Zane Miners got nicked up, the former walk-on running back, got nicked up at the end of the spring game. Teddy Knox ended up jogging off after looked like a kind of an ankle tweak or something. But they did get out of it healthy. I think the offense built some confidence going against the twos. And look, it was fun for everyone. It was a nice night out there in Highland Park. And I think looking ahead now, this SMU offensive line is now kind of the focal point, as well as the tight end room as far as building depth through the transfer portal. And we'll talk a little bit about that after the spring game recap winds down. But they were able to control things for the most part. There wasn't much pressure on Preston Stone, which you would expect. They faced a kind of a defensive line that again was primarily backups, but you then get a look at what Bryan Massey was able to do on the defensive side of the ball. He really, made a statement. I felt like he had a missed tackle, but had really kind of penned the runner in, so there wasn't much more to it as far as a gain. And look, he had an interception that he returned for a touchdown, and that I believe came off of Kevin Henry Jennings. But it was just a great read over the middle, and he intercepts it and returns it for a touchdown. That was what I wanted to see from Bryan Massey. He played with an edge. He had a good pop on a player during the spring game as well. So showing that physicality. Jonathan McGill, I believe, had a sack as well. So that safety room, I think you saw a really nice group of safeties back there for SMU. Brandon Crosley had some really nice tackles. I know he upended a guy, a runner during the spring game as well. Overall, I was just impressed with what they were able to do. I think that's a safety room that didn't really allow too much deep passing. Again, when you look at the spring game, you got to know that it was ones facing backups on both sides of the ball for the most part, and they were able to keep things ahead of them for the most part, and just overall stifle whoever was on the opposing side of the offense. But Kevin Henry Jennings, threw that interception. He had some passes he probably wants back, kind of some inaccurate throws here and there, but he also showed, that arm. He had a couple nice passes down the field that went for big plays. And he was able to, get some of those other guys, some other backups on the SMU offense involved. The defense, I think the big thing is the pressure they were able to get. Again, going against the second team offense, you expect that kind of dominance from your starting defense. And I really feel like Jordan Miller, Elijah Roberts, we saw Nelson Paul, multiple guys really flash overall from the defensive side of the ball. And that's what you wanted. This whole spring game, I think now looking back, and we didn't necessarily know exactly what it was going to look like, if it was going to be a full game, which it was in the end, after a little bit of warm up and 7-on-7 and things like that. But primarily a game. It was a feel good kind of atmosphere. You have your starters going against the backups, and there are some good things to take away. There's really also not too much else that you can sit back there and really say, okay, that was really good. That was, important that happened, and things like that. So I like the setup for SMU. They had a ton of recruits on campus. A lot of their top targets were there as well. And we'll cover that. We're going to do a recruiting podcast later this week and kind of dive into, where things stand with some of their top targets, as now the coaching staff will get geared up to go on the road here soon. They'll have some exit meetings. They'll be able to they'll be able to sit down with some of the players and address kind of where they stand and what they expect from them moving forward. This is a team that I don't expect too much as far as surprises go from the transfer portal. And that transfer portal window opened on Saturday, the day after the SMU spring game. And for the SMU staff, they're going to be, again, meeting with players and working through, again, the expectations going forward now that spring is in the books for this team. I think if you look at players that could be looking to find a new home, we did find out about two. Bobby Duncombe, a former blue shirt for SMU defensive end out of Austin, did enter the transfer portal. And Danielson Ike did announce that he's looking to play college football elsewhere. Danielson Ike was a former highly touted prospect coming out of the Kansas City area. Never panned out. I think really just he came to SMU and sometimes you can, but you can't fault players. But he went full in on going to school at SMU, and I believe he's going to graduate. So good for him. But he just didn't end up embracing the football side of things like they had hoped. So those two guys are out the door. They hadn't been on the team, so it's not a big deal in that respect. But those are two notable early transfer portal entries for SMU. I expect there to be some other players that do jump into the mix at some point to enter the transfer portal, and they'll be players that don't really surprise you. They're players that haven't been with the team, that haven't played a lot, and are going to look for a fresh start elsewhere, probably drop down a level of play overall. So I think this is going to be that final, maybe that final purge of players that aren't necessarily going to contribute to SMU this season, and they move on. They've been, with the prior staff, they've been, players that, again, haven't really jumped in to being contributors like the SMU staff would have hoped. And that goes back to, Sonny Dykes as well. As far as some final spring takeaways, I think overall, I think Preston Stone, makes you feel a little bit better about where he's at. His development, throwing the football down the field, was really, I think, honestly, night and day from when it started. That was one of the first things we noticed, is that he was not throwing the football down the field the way you would have wanted him to in this offense. and developed into a really nice downfield passer by the end of spring. And I think that's important. That's as he develops his chemistry with his wide receivers. You wanted him to uh, continue to show that he could be that guy to lead this offense. And to do that, you have to throw the football down the field. So to cap his spring with a few big plays really impressed me. It was exactly kind of what you wanted. 3 touchdown passes on 4 possessions, 2 of which went to Jordan Kerley, had a nice deep pass to Moochie Dixon. And look, I think the running back position is a group that you feel good about. You have Tyler Levine, who sat out for the spring as he recovered from injury. Kamar Wheaton was a non-factor. He was suspended. He was coming back. He was nicked up. Rhett Lashley said he could have played on Friday, but they just held him out of precaution. But the way that Jalen Knighton, LJ Johnson, and Velton Gardner ran the ball, and Brandon Epton at times ran the ball during spring, makes you feel good about that running back room. The offensive line along the interior is something that still kind of concerns me when it comes to how they looked in the spring. But help is on the way. Ja'Kai Clark, the Miami transfer, and Logan Parr, the Texas transfer, are arriving this summer, as well as 3 freshman offensive linemen, and Justin Osborne is expected back by fall camp. So the offensive tackle position has really been solidified well by Hiron White coming in at right tackle and Marcus Bryant holding down the left side. So the offensive line, work in progress, but they did a fairly good job this spring with what they had. So I'm looking forward to seeing that position battle rage on in fall camp. I think the development of the linebacker room, and we'll go into that in a minute with the transfer edition, but the development of Chris Adamora was really impressive. He converted from safety, moved down to linebacker, and he looks the part now of a linebacker. And I think it was important for him to have that type of a breakthrough spring. Obviously, he's going into what is his last season of college football, so it's his money year, so to speak. And he's going to try to make himself some by having a strong year at linebacker. But I was really impressed with how quickly he picked up. And you could see the developments from the beginning of spring to the end of spring, just how quickly it kind of came to him. He's not a finished product by any means, but I was really impressed with him. Ahmad Walker is a your no doubt starter there, and is going to be a good one for SMU. Jaquandis Burns is another that is going to be factoring in, and then Alex Kilgore, who had a couple nice tackles in the spring game, is going to be a really good linebacker. It was apparent. A lot of people, were impressed with the way he developed, and then he came out in the spring game and had a few nice tackles. So there was kind of some buzz around him from various people that were just catching the game that he impressed. Then finally, that secondary, it's just night and day, the way they look compared to the start of spring, or I guess I should say dating back to last season, with the new faces that are in there. Jalen Davis Robinson had a really nice play, had a nice tackle. He wasn't afraid to stick his nose in there. We talked about Bryan Massey and the safety group having a strong spring game. I think you've got to feel good about where that group stands entering the offseason. And then, of course, you've got the big guys up front that really were able to, hold down that front line really well and make it difficult for this SMU offense at various points of the spring to move the football. They made it difficult on the backups Friday night, and I think that size has just been a huge deal, and we'll see. I think they still try to address that position through the transfer portal. So that's about it on the SMU spring game. It's been a fun spring. Hope you guys enjoyed our coverage of spring ball, notebooks, practice highlights, and interviews. We'll have much more on the team as we now take stock in spring being over and what's next for this SMU team. Speaking of what's next, the SMU Mustangs did pick up a transfer addition, Temple linebacker Kobe Wilson, a guy who has 2 years of eligibility remaining, announced on Twitter on Sunday that he was headed to Dallas for the rest of his college career. He was at the spring game on Friday. He's been a consistent producer for the Owls over the last 2 years. In 2020, he broke out, played 5 games as a true freshman, coming out of Georgia, out of Snellville, Georgia. He went to Parkview High School. He was a really highly touted recruit, had a lot of high-profile offers. Ended up, I think, he ends up going to Temple, but I think his size, he ends up being he's about 6 foot. He's about 220. I think some of those big-time programs opted for bigger, taller guys. That ends up being kind of the case. But a very productive linebacker in high school and a guy that was on the radar very early. I think I interviewed him way back in the day. But in 2021, all 12 games, 51 total stops, 4 tackles for loss, and a sack and a forced fumble. He's had a forced fumble in every year of his college career. In 2022, made 64 total tackles, 38 that were solo, 5.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups, a forced fumble, and picked up 2 fumbles. This is a really nice addition for SMU because you have a guy in Ahmad Walker who's your no doubt starter, and then you have 3 players who have been vying for playing time during spring, and now you can pick up a transfer addition in Kobe Wilson who can factor in right away. I think he's got that ability to play various positions. He could play Mike. He could play Will. He could come off the edge. In a sense, Scott Simons can move him around. But as you see on the film here, he's got that ability to read and diagnose. I think he does a really nice job staying off of blocks. I think for somebody like him, he's exactly what SMU needed. You don't want to put too much on Alex Kilgore's plate, although you expect him to play at a decent clip as a true freshman. This allows him maybe a little bit more time to develop, but it also provides a good bit of competition. They bring in Kobe Wilson, 2 years of eligibility remaining. When Chris Adamora leaves next year, then you have somebody who's got that ability to also kind of, be that, 1 year left guy in the room. So you've addressed it in multiple ways with this pickup of Kobe Wilson, as you see some of the highlights here from his Twitter post with his highlights when he entered the portal. And SMU got on him quickly. He's a guy that they've been recruiting for a long, long time and, kind of kept it quiet. But I can tell you they're pretty excited about him jumping on board, and he'll be able to factor in right away. And I think, what you want from him is to bring him in and he provides competition. He could end up being a starter. And if he does, that means he's probably done a really nice job picking up the defense quickly. And again, he's not the tallest guy. He's maybe 6 foot, 5'11" ish. But he's got that ability at the AAC level to produce, and has done that for multiple years now. And in a bad Temple program, I don't know how long Stan Drayton will actually last there, but he's loses one of his contributors on the defensive side of the ball, and SMU is the beneficiary of that. And he's played some special teams too. He's a guy that'll definitely push Chris Adamora and Jaquandis Burns, and I think that's what you want. If you're Cam Farrar, I think he is somebody now that is has to step up this offseason. Cam Farrar is kind of in a similar mold as Kobe Wilson, but hasn't had the production, hasn't produced like they would have wanted him to. And you have Brandon Maizano, the freshman, coming in this summer. This linebacker room now has just the right amount of linebackers. I feel like I don't know if they'll take a second linebacker unless it's somebody really, really good. But this is a really nice pickup for SMU in Kobe Wilson as the NCAA Transfer Portal window opens. They also hosted Judo Colo, the Illinois State defensive line transfer, this weekend for an official visit. He's going to check out Marshall. He's also going to check out UConn, I believe. So he's got 3 official visits. He's about 6'4", 290 pounds. He had 21 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss in 9 games last year. Obviously, Keenan Hall spent some time with him at Illinois State, and he'll have 2 years of eligibility remaining. I think SMU is going to be in the hunt for multiple defensive linemen, a pass rusher, and a true hand in the dirt guy. And Judo Colo is one of those guys to certainly watch. You know, he did visit. He's got some ties to the program with Keenan Hall, but he is going to take more visits. He's going to see what else is out there, and we'll go from there. But I think SMU is going to be gunning for a pass rusher, especially with Jalen Samuels' future potentially up in the air since he's been suspended, and a hand in the dirt defensive lineman. Because if you can add a guy that has size and length and maybe a little bit of production, or a younger player who's on the come up, who's highly touted and looks like, you know, they've got a bright future, that could be important for SMU as far as addressing the defensive line and rounding it out, because you've got Jordan Miller, Elijah Roberts, Devere Levelston, and Elijah Chapman as your consistent hand in the dirt guys. You do have David Abiara, Stephon Wright, Mike Johan, Sandro Njiki, who have shown some promise, especially Stephon Wright and David Abiara, that they could grow into contributors for you. But they need somebody to really address kind of that backup nose tackle position. If they can get a big body to add to that mix, that would be probably one of the biggest things SMU could do in the transfer portal, you know, when it comes to addressing that need. If they can get that big backup, either somebody who's going to finish up his college career and wants to, you know, play on a winning team, or again, kind of maybe a highly touted younger player, that would be important to really providing that depth. You know, being like if they could get somebody who could give you Terrence Newman like reps, that would not be a bad thing. But you would want him to be like a 6'4", 330 pounder. Add some size, add some length, not just, you know, kind of a squatty nose tackle like Terrence was. So on the transfer front, I do think tight end is going to be a big position of need for SMU. We saw RJ Maryland last year, what he could do. We saw it in the spring game. He's got a very bright future. And Nolan Matthews-Harris, you know, got some good burn with the second team. But look, that's a position that's thin on guys that have been proven contributors. They need somebody that they can also bring in and maybe play as a more consistent blocking tight end. I think that's important. I will note, I saw Trip Reardon, 2023 SMU signee out of Frisco Wakeland, over at the SMU spring game. And he really looks like he's added some size. I mean, he was all of 6'5", and probably about 250 pounds. I'm going to catch up with Trip and we'll do an interview about what he saw from the spring game. But he's going to come in and provide some instant size. I mean, quite frankly, SMU doesn't have a tight end on the roster that looks like him. That's how big he is. And he was standing on the sideline. He kind of looked like a former player in a sense with that size. But so SMU will have Trip Reardon come on campus. Adam Moore will come on campus. But they do need somebody who's maybe a veteran tight end that they can bring in and provide instant impact as far as blocking, maybe a little bit of, you know, the receiving side of things to, you know, help the offense stay versatile. But they're going to be on the hunt for a tight end. And I think they're on the hunt for an outside receiver. That is a position that SMU would like one more guy to come in and provide some depth. Or you can maybe find a younger guy who's kind of the future. But look, they like what Romello Brinson did during the spring. He came on late. Moochie Dixon was terrific. Obviously, you've got Jordan Kerley and Keyshawn Smith. Those are your likely starters on the outside, but a big body receiver, a red zone threat. That would be a position that I think SMU would like to address, and I'm interested to see if anybody pops up that catches their eye. Finally, I switch back over to the defense, let me take one more stab at a transfer portal position of need. And I do think offensive linemen, they would like to take one more. I think they know how thin offensive line can get quickly. And if they could find somebody in the transfer portal that is versatile, like an offensive guard, tackle, somebody who's played multiple positions that has a lot of size and experience. I will mention, and I'm not saying that it's happening, but former Cedar Hill offensive lineman Cortland Ford did enter the transfer portal. He is coming from USC after multiple years of contributing to USC. He's on the move. SMU has some ties to him. Sonny Dykes and his staff passed on him coming out of high school when he had some knee issues, but now he's in the portal. I would think Texas Tech is going to be in there. Of course, Joey McGuire, the former Cedar Hill coach, but SMU is going to be probably kicking the tires on Cortland Ford. It would be kind of that final piece to solidifying the offensive line in the near future, because you have Marcus Bryant, you have Hiron White. Hiron White's gone after this year. PJ Williams looks like your future right tackle. Maybe he switches over long-term and plays left after Marcus Bryant leaves, maybe after this year, maybe after next. But then you have Cortland Ford, who did battle some injuries during spring with USC. Maybe he could even be a guy that, they bring in and they take it slow with. And you say, your body's beat up. Maybe you are the starting right tackle the next year and they flip PJ Williams over. Basically, there could be some really interesting shuffling on SMU's offensive line depending on how this group plays its cards. If Marcus Bryant goes out and has, an all AAC best offensive tackle in the league type of season, he could be out after next year and go to the NFL draft. So continuing to take care of this offensive line from a depth and talent perspective would be a reason why I would at least kick the tires and strongly consider taking a Cortland Ford, who just entered the transfer portal from USC. Finally, I do think they're going to hunt for a safety. I think that's a position that, again, showed a lot of promise in the spring. Brandon Crosley, Bryan Massey, Jonathan McGill, Ahmad Moses, CJ Sanders, Isaiah Wacobia, all are really factors in there. But Isaiah Wacobia, unproven back there since his freshman year. You also have, that probably feeling that if you get hit with the injury bug, there can't be a drop off. That's the big thing that when I talk and kind of kick around, all right, who could they go after? It's always, we don't want to drop off. That's the big thing that's kind of been reiterated to me, is when an injury happens, we take this guy and look at it and say, is there going to be a drop off? We hope not. Now, there are certain players that you're going to absolutely have a drop off, but that's been the key for SMU as far as assembling its transfer class. They, from a talent perspective, don't want there to be a drop off. There might be players that need to contribute or continue to develop and continue to find their way. But from a pure talent perspective, it needs to make sense. And I think safety is a position that SMU would see a lot of sense in adding as well. So with that, guys, we're going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed it, kicking off your Monday. We'll be back and kind of do a deeper dive on the recruiting front, as well as maybe more transfer portal news. We'll continue to monitor that and see what happens as the portal window is open. It is open until April 30th, and then it'll close back down. And obviously, if you're not in there by then, you have to wait. But they can host guys in May. They can host guys in June. But the goal would be for these guys to be on campus by June. So lots of good stuff to come at ontheponyexpress.com. If you're listening to this and aren't a subscriber, $10 for 4 months ends tonight. Last day of our spring game special. So be sure to subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com, and we will catch you guys later in the week with another edition of the recruiting podcast. So have a great Monday and enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk to you guys later this week. Thanks for listening.